Hello and welcome to Pivotal People. Today we're going to be speaking to Adam Hutchison. Adam is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Belmont Care. Hi Adam, thank you very much for joining us today at Pivotal People. We're really happy to see you. So just first of all, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, about Belmont Healthcare and about what you're doing within the role at the moment.
Yeah, okay, well thanks very much for having me, appreciate it. The opportunity is always great. Belmont Healthcare, we're a small care home and domiciliary care operator. So we predominantly operate in the southeast. We are currently have 7 homes, soon to be 8, and we support people. Our focus has been slightly different in that post the pandemic, we pivoted slightly to be more focused on high acuity, hospital discharge, discharge to assess, things like that, which kind of then led on to domiciliary because it was very much around that due to my own personal circumstances. I've got my nan's 95 and she lives on her own, and I saw how difficult it is if you have, she broke her hip, she was in hospital, and then trying to get her to go back home again, and that psychology of like, how do we enable that a little bit more, kind of took us on a different journey, which meant that we were not predominantly private focused. We are probably 25% private. And most of those convert after being with us for a while. So majority of our referrals come from the NHS, CCHE or the local authority. And because we're high acuity, obviously that's how we cover the sort of fee differential because of the nature that we support. We're not many people do what we do. We're kind of quite lucky that the fees never really come into a problem because we take people that most other people wouldn't. Yeah. And then that led us on a journey to be home first focused. And despite the fact that we're 85% of the business is care homes, we're still focused on home first. We think, how can we aid people to do that, which has led me into our sort of sister business that we have now, which is called Elana, which is our sort of app-based home care service where we're supporting people with again, very much around hospital reinablement and how we are creating this ecosystem within a home, whether that's through GP appointments, through pharmaceuticals, through, items that they might need, such as care beds and things like that, and also obviously being able to book and have carers come into their own home. And then Belmont is there as the sort of longer term option because we support people, dementia, nursing, and sort of high needs is where we tend to sit.
So a very successful business.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yes.
It's had its challenges.
Of course.
Much of our growth path happened just before COVID, so we kind of took on a lot at that period where we acquired a couple of homes, and then the pandemic hit, which meant that, to be fair, it took us a few years to rebuild.
Of course.
We went down to sort of 61% occupancy across the group. It was a challenging time when we'd taken on quite a lot of debt.
Yeah, it was.
As you would do with growth. But it's certainly starting to come back, and we feel like we're in a better position now than we probably ever have been. So it's moving in the right direction.
Good. So what I want to know is how you got there. How did you get to this point of running this successful business as a care home or care provider? So take me back to your childhood. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your education and...
from the West Midlands.
I
probably tell from the accent. A lot of my business is in Kent and East Sussex, so I get a lot of I'm the West Midlander that comes down to Kent. But born and raised in the West Midlands, and my father got into the care industry when I was about 13, 14. Which for him was a little bit off-piece. So my mother passed away when I was 12, and he stopped working. He worked in the spring industry, so he used to make the little springs for the Kingfisher toys. So you might remember the little wooden caterpillar that had the spring ears. So the springs were made by my father's company. Wow. And he sort of sold that to look after, because I'm one of 3 boys, the eldest of 3 boys. So he looked after us for sort of a year, 18 months, because he was trying to navigate, the old school generation of being the dad that worked and the mum was at home. And, he now had to start cooking and cleaning and taking kids to school and stuff. So it was a bit of a shock for him. And then he was invited, because he's extremely good with numbers. He's a financy type guy, and he was invited to join a company that was actually back then called Belmont Healthcare.
Oh.
And the reason it was called Belmont Healthcare is there's a road in a town called Redditch, which is in the West Midlands, which is actually now where our new head office is. So we've kind of gone back to roots. And there's a road that runs all the way through from one end of the town to the other end of the town. And because it's a new town, the road's alphabetical. So it starts with Aston Close. I lived on Cranham Close with my dad. And the guy who asked him to join the business lived on Belmont Close. And that's why it was called Belmont Healthcare, because it was named after the close he lived on. And they had about, 20 or 30 homes. My dad was doing the finance stuff. And then they broke the business down, and a lot of the care homes that were in that original business were sold to Travelodge. Okay. So a lot of the Travelodges in like Blackpool, Lytham, St Anne's, Manchester used to be these care homes. They knocked them down and obviously built them up. Some of them, I think, were the same buildings. And what happened was my dad's kind of golden goodbye, let's say, was he was just given these 2 homes in New Romney in Kent, across the road from each other. That was his kind of payout. Was kind of like, we're selling the business, but we can't sell these 2 because they don't want hotels down there. We'll give them to you as your thing. And then he kind of ran those as a lifestyle business for probably 15 years. He was travelling from, looking after us, grandparents looking after us. Then he'd go down to Kent for a couple of days, then he'd come back.
That's quite a trek as well, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, it's 3 hours. It's not an easy one. And then, so I went to university in Nottingham, studied computers and IT and business, and then I moved to London, and I was living in London for a while, and I had a telecommunications business. So we used to, it was a reseller type business. Always wanted to get into something that was more real estate backed. Just as I grew up, decided that that's what I wanted to do. I was doing a couple of bits of bobs, consultancy, things like that. And my dad phones me up and said, I want to sell these care homes now, I want to retire. I was like, okay. I've been going into care homes since I was, 14, 15. So I was like, okay, well, I've got a few days a week spare. I'll come and help you. And then 2 years later, I basically bought them off him. So I ended up kind of learning the trade, being around, working with him. But him and I had this kind of bit of a joke, which we still have now, is that I would go hunting for pounds while my dad tried to save pennies. That's what we would kind of, and he wanted to kind of,
Great combination.
he'd be the guy that would be driving to Iceland to get the food. And if it was snowing, he'd be, spooning the snow off the driveway. That was kind of him. Whereas I kind of, I remember walking into the office was in the roof of this care home called Sandbanks, which was down in New Romney in Kent. And in the roof was was a flat, which is where he used to live when he was there, and the office where it had a bookkeeper in. And I just remember walking in, seeing all these dusty boxes and these the big old white PCs with the screen on and stuff, going, okay, what's this all about? Coming from an IT background, working in the city was quite a culture shock. But then part of my IT background, I used to run call centres. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed is the kind of support and staffing with call centres and care staff. It might sound silly, but there is a point to this, are actually very similar. It's that kind of like high attrition, can have a relatively young workforce, part-time hours, and relatively low pay for what you do. So you had the same kind of cultural things that I brought into call centres to have a much stronger staff turnover, as in we didn't lose as many people, I saw real synergies in care staff. So, and back in 2014, 2015 maybe, I wrote a book, and the book was called Risk versus Reward, the employer-employee conundrum. And all it was about is about how important your team are compared to you as the business. And all of those synergies I saw in care, really. So it was kind of, I kind of really enjoyed that. So I got the real estate bit, and I got the bit that I was quite experienced in. And then I just loved the fact that I didn't have to wear a 3-piece suit every day. I didn't have to go out for dinner and drinks in the evening to try and win customers. And it felt a lot more real. And I felt like there was value that was coming from it. So at that time, because this care home was called Sandbanks, because the business was broken down and my dad just had these 2 homes, it was called Belmont Sandbanks Care Homes. Okay, is what it was called. And then when I took over and kind of started looking at growth opportunities, we opened a day centre. We ended up selling Sandbanks and I turned it into apartments. But the apartments were specifically local authority, so people staffing could get hold of them rather than being, So we sold it on to a developer who's developing that out, and we started growing the portfolio and buying more homes, and then and it kind of grew from there really. So that was kind of 2018. Probably was the first care home I ever bought, 2018, which was something out of administration, because that was kind of the only opportunity that I saw. We're not a, I don't have a family office, and we didn't have a wealthy background. My dad did, he did really well, and he looked after us, but I wasn't in a position where I could just go and buy care homes. So the business model was to go to the bank and leverage. So we kept buying failing ones and tried to redo them up, which was a hard slog. I mean, I bought 3 inadequates in my time and 3 homes in administration, and I learned very quickly that that's hard.
It is hard.
And obviously then we getting into sort of 2019, 2020, went into the pandemic period that I sort of talked about, and then now our journey's kind of pivoted slightly differently, where we've managed to get to a place where we've got a bit of value, and we've been able to raise funding through various avenues to enable us to grow. And I suppose that's kind of the potted history of how I got here. But it was ultimately down to the fact my dad rang me up one day and said, I want to sell these and retire.
Yeah.
If he hadn't have said that, I probably wouldn't be doing it.
And you gave your dad a wonderful retirement by buying his care homes from him.
Yeah, well, actually, it was quite interesting, because I did say to him that he was just hell bent on, like, he wanted to get rid of them, and I was like, Dad, there's more in this, and so actually he stayed in for quite a while, which I think, over long term, I think I don't say it definitely has benefited, because it meant that there was more value for what he eventually kind of retired on. He lives down by the seaside in Bournemouth, so he's very happy.
Fantastic. So are your brothers involved in the business as well?
Well, no, neither of them are, but my middle brother, he is involved from an external perspective, because he's actually graphics and branding, so he does all of our brand work, website. Fantastic. And we're actually in about 5-6 weeks time we're actually rebranding, so we're relaunching a complete new brand, new company values, because we're in the process now of acquiring 3 more homes, and as part of that acquisition we're doing a whole rebrand, so he's involved from that point of view, so when that comes out you'll see his work.
Fantastic.
So he's very much that, he's like online and graphics and very stuff. That's what he does.
Very good. But, so we know it's a very challenging time for providers at the moment. We know what you're all going through. As far as
I don't know, it's interesting.
Really?
I don't think so.
Don't you think so?
No, I mean, I keep hearing, I'm quite controversial, so
good.
I was speaking at an event at the Care Show, and I think I upset a few people, because I have quite strong opinions about how, especially about how the new build kind of care development world sits. Yeah. I love the stuff that we can. There's loads of buildings out there. Let's do something with them. Pretty much everything we've bought, we either refurbed, put an extension on, repurposed it. But yeah, I mean, we've had where we are today to where we are where we were in 2019, 2020, 2021, and potentially back end of 2022. I think we should be jumping up and down for joy, because we had massive recruitment challenges. Do we have that now? No, I don't believe so.
Nursing, maybe. Do you have nursing homes?
Yeah, but
you struggle to get nurses?
No.
Fantastic.
Pay them well and they'll come.
Good point. Yeah.
Pay them well and look after them, and they will come. I mean, of course, we always have our attrition, and we recruit, but over the last 2 or 3 years, from where our recruitment was to where our recruitment is, I can't say that it's particularly challenging in terms of we're always going to have agency, and we're always going to have people, and you're always going to have to try and recruit. But that's any industry now. I mean, I don't think that we should, plead poverty on that aspect. And ultimately, if you look at from an investment perspective and a banking perspective, everything that we do is real estate backed. So everybody loves that. Anybody that wants to lend money wants something tangible to hold on to. It can't just be profit. So if it's not tech, which everybody just loves, but technically there's nothing tangible that you're buying. You're buying an outcome, which might not happen. Okay. With real estate, you kind of know the outcome. It's probably 5% of real estate isn't going to work. You look at the investment track across Europe, and certainly from the US into the UK, there's 3 or 4 key strands. You've had, residential and commercial properties. Residential, the regulations around being a landlord are getting more challenging. So why do you want to invest in that? Commercial, is there really anything in it unless you're doing it en masse? Hospitality is kind of locked down in a particular way. You've got a lot more people working from home. There's a lot less business travel, a lot more Airbnb, a lot more people are, renting a room or putting a cabin. So there's a lot more people are loving to do different types of holidays, such as camping and glamping and things like that. So I think that window of hospitality has certainly dwindled in terms of an investment.
Interesting. Yeah.
Whereas healthcare is endless.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Private healthcare, hospitals and care homes and nursing homes is a real estate of an aging population staying well longer, which means they're going to continually be required. So if you're looking at it as and again, this is an opinion, but if you look at it en masse as an investor and you go, where would I prefer my money to be right now that isn't buying real estate in London, because yes, you're going to get your return, but it's so expensive to buy. Well, healthcare is a pretty good back. And that's why, certainly from the US, we're seeing so much investment still coming into the sector and why there is so much investment in healthcare real estate. But
it's really refreshing to hear a provider who is feeling good about the future.
Yeah, well, I think there's always going to be challenges though, isn't there? Because, we've got CQC and we've got some of the banking might be difficult and our interest rates are high. But again, I go back to my dad telling me a story in 1990 when John Major was in charge of the country. And that was, a conservative government that's, based around, backing businesses. And he had a mortgage of 19%. And then he renegotiated a deal with Citibank that got him 12.5%.
Yeah.
Are we paying 12.5% now? Okay, we're not paying 1.2 anymore, but if anybody felt that was actually sustainable, I think anybody that had it for we had it 7, 8, 9, 10 years, we should be looking back and going, how did we get away with that?
That's a good point.
3 to 6% is where we always should be, and if we're borrowing at that sort of level, then I think that's positive. And the banks are going to be tougher to borrow from, but still, a bank and an investor's job, their actual job is to lend money.
Yes.
That's all their primary function. So ultimately they have to do that at some point to unlock everything. But if you're making a decision on where that's going to go, and I was sat in that chair, I'll be going, well, I'm just going to put it in healthcare.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to turn healthcare off tomorrow.
That's very
it's
true.
always ring-fenced by the government. People are always going to need it. Ageing population. So all of those metrics, yes, we have loads of challenges. We don't get enough money from the government. We don't get this. The NHS is broken, blah, 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 blah. I don't disagree with any of those points. They're all valid. But I don't think it's a poor time to be. I'd prefer to be in this industry than anything else, unless I, could build an app. Then that might be different. If you've got an app, you'll be fine. At the moment, it feels.
That's absolutely fascinating. And what's lovely about your interview today is the positivity. It's really great to see, and the future of healthcare for me, for us, for all of us, is positive.
Yeah, so, I think the breaking of the lines really between NHS and social care is the key problem. Is that we all know that if people can just acknowledge that social care has a huge role to play in re-enablement, rehabilitation, supportive behaviours, all of those types of things, and that the NHS is there for when you really need it, for acute injuries. If we can get through that, that's the problem. Because then the system unlocks itself. And a lot of people sort of like muddy the waters and shout at each other and moan about this and moan about that and march the streets, fine, that's great. But actually, it's much simpler than that. We have to change public perception. Because if you go to France, you go to New Zealand, you go to Canada, you go to those countries, Holland, I've spent some time in Holland looking at their system, and you look at how people are and view what they see as sustainable long-term supportive care post-acute operation. They have a much wider understanding of what it is. And what we've done here is we've just kind of thought that the NHS is there to fix everything. But what we just need to do is change the dialogue, and we just need to advertise to people, just wider general public, to say, how do we... No, that's absolutely what it does here, but it doesn't do all of that. And we've got to stop lying to people that that's what we're doing. And I think that's my biggest challenge for me, is that we don't do enough of that. It's just that public... change of perception, because people don't realise what social care is until they need it.
No, they don't.
But why don't we start telling people when they're 20 that, by the way, you might need to understand that this is what you need for social care. Oh, education is a good point. So I've got a massive bugbear with why is it that if you're at a college or a school, that if you're not very academic, I'll go and do an adult social care MVQ.
Yeah.
The messaging, again, is so wrong.
Absolutely.
So wrong. Why don't we just change that to, you're more practically inclined.
Yeah.
These are the practical industries that you could work in. Electrician, carpentry, da-da-da-da. Oh, social care, support and care work is one of those as well. Just change the way that we promote something.
You're right.
And we just don't do enough of that in the mind's eye. And then people would think differently. They won't go, oh God, another care home's being built down the road, and roll their eyes. They would go, that's what that does.
Yeah.
That's what that's doing. And that's really good. Or maybe that's something that we consider for X, Y and Z individuals in our family as and when they might need it. And why aren't we talking about insurance policies?
Absolutely.
All over the world they have insurance policies for, I have private healthcare for my family. Well, I would happily pay an additional monthly premium that covers my nan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I'm paying for it now.
Yeah.
And I might pay into that for 40 years. So why is it that we're not considering? And that it's for my nan for the time being, and then once something happens to her, she's 50 years older than me, then it reverts back to me. And I'm starting to pay into something, which means, I don't have to worry about selling my house. And I don't have to worry about this, I don't have to worry about that. And then, the whole arguments around things like inheritance tax start to go out the window, because actually what you're doing is you're educating people to say, well, you're building a pot to look after you when you're older and your closest ones of your age. Everyone else starts doing that. And then it just this difference between, well, I'm not expecting to have that to sort me out then, I need to sort myself out.
Yeah,
and then the mindset changes in younger people because they're focused on themselves rather than focused on what I'm going to get. And it's just a massive cycle. And I've talked about it for a long time, but I don't sit in the seat to make a change. So I just don't think those conversations happen enough. No. And I think that changes the mindset a bit.
It's brilliant. That's a really, really interesting conversation. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for being here.
I'm really sorry we went over, but it was great.